So, hi everyone. Again, if we did this already, but for the first time, if not, my name is Michael Strumberger, as you can see on the screen right below my name. And I'm here with Neera Dukaran. Neera?
Hi. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Oh, great. We've already got some emoji feedback coming.
That's so lovely. Thank you.
I have to say, though, I was on an air meet yesterday with 330 attendees. And eventually, it was actually, so the podcast was called Your Undivided Attention, about how social media and mobile phones are just in such a distraction economy right now. And anyway, eventually the speaker just had to say, can we please cut down on the emojis because they're really distracting. But use them artfully, please. So this is Air Meet. You've just come in. If you were here a little while ago, you were in the social lounge. And just to make sure you're at the right session, this is the Blue Ocean introductory seminar. And the way it's going to go is that we'll have these few words at the beginning, and then I will be presenting a slideshow, which you may have already seen before because it's on the Greens Connect website. But it is sort of the introductory primer deck to this idea about what Blue Ocean is and what that could look like in action. So I'll go through that. I won't belabor it because what I would really like to do is stay high level with that. And Neera is going to be monitoring the chat and pulling in questions, but also and so raising questions when she thinks it feels appropriate. And then we'll move into more of a focused Q&A session. So after that, that whole session will probably, including this intro, will take about 55 minutes, and then we'll take a 5-minute break. So we'll go back into the social lounge and then do what you need to do, bio break, get a glass of water, and then we'll screen a video that I mentioned, and it's a presentation from from a allied political party in Europe who has a very similar story to tell about dysfunction in their organization, how they overcame it, and now are doing some of the best political work of their lives. And then we'll have a quick demonstration of the Greens Connect platform to give more people a sense of how, in their work in the Green Party, that could become useful for them. And then after that, we'll pretty much have 15 minutes left in the 2-hour time that we set for this session. But the social lounge will be open and no one's getting kicked out. So you can just use that as you see fit. So thanks again for coming. First of all, I want to acknowledge that I make my home and my livelihood on unceded Coast Salish territory, including territory of the Saitnich, Sayout, and Cowichan peoples. And I invite us all to reflect deeply on this, remembering that many of our ancestors came to these lands through the ongoing processes of dispossession and colonialism. And I hold this understanding in my interactions and engagements with this land and its people. And today I want to make my work a sacred offering in the hopes that together we can at last achieve truth and reconciliation and rewrite an honorable and honest nation with nation story of this land. This isn't going to change things overnight, but it's my contribution today. Haichka. So I'm going to jump right into the presentation. But for a little bit of context, my story, my pathway here, and the story of Blue Ocean, how it came into existence, is really one about overcoming conflict. Some people on this call, Neera was involved as well with something called Members for Growth and Renewal. And the work of that work brought me and some of my collaborators to a place where we realized that in a situation where there is conflict, where we have opposing ideas, the feeling that, oh, that person's they're not listening, they're not getting it, they're being intransigent, they're being intractable, they're being pig-headed, whatever that feels like, right? And they're probably feeling the exact same thing about me. How do you get out of that? And blue ocean is a possible solution. So John Wilson, who's also on this call, introduced this actual idea to me, which is blue ocean thinking, blue ocean strategy. And it's about leaving the fight, leaving the known territory, leaving the known finite space with the known rules about how we play, and go off somewhere where you're no longer in that conflict, where you're no longer competing, and explore what would be possible there. So that's, in a nutshell, what this is going to be all about. So I'm going to start sharing my screen to get into the presentation. Yeah, and if as questions come up, you can use the chat and on the side, keeping in mind that we'll have a proper Q&A session. But I do want to have the chat open so that if at any point, a number of people are just like, huh, what? Hold on, slow down. What does that mean? Nir is going to be keeping an eye on that, and we can take a pause as needed. A number of people have collaborated on this. This isn't at all just my work, in no particular order, at different phases throughout the process. John Wilson was a major collaborator on this, Andrew Hazen, Anne Lavender, Victoria Serta at the beginning, not so much lately, but so this is, I by no means take credit for this. I'm a messenger.
There's a key question. Sue's asking, is the session being recorded?
It is being recorded, yeah.
Okay.
Currently recording session, yeah, I just confirmed. I've got a little red dot. Okay, so this is the context, and this is really important. So we're about addressing identified real challenges, barriers to success in this organization. And a lot of it, for some of you may be familiar with the report that our federal council commissioned to look at the 2019 election and find out what's going on. And there were some significant problems. So there won't be time to read through all of this, but what we, in reviewing the situation, noticed that there were some really important sort of categories to think about where we need to do work. And those are areas of partnership, culture, defining purpose, increasing agility, and having impact. So Blue Ocean's mission is it's about empowerment. It's about finding ways to tap into this collective wisdom, strength, power, passion of all the people within this organization, and at the edges or even allied with this organization, to help do the great work that's needed. And this presentation is going to be broken into 3 sections, and this is hopefully going to make sense in the way that we think about how to live, how to apply the blue ocean way of thinking. And the first part is about us as individuals, and it's to get into this mindset of blue ocean, leaving the known territory, exploring what could be. And a lot of that really comes down to how we show up and the values and principles that guide us. Then once we're individuals who have all sort of signed on to and agreed to that way of thinking, or in practice of that, then we can start to look at what does it look like when we work together? And so that gets into a collaborative culture. And then finally, when we have a collaborative culture, then we can start to think about, well, how do we do that coherently all across the country? And that's where we start looking at applying the thinking and the culture into online tools that can actually scale this quality of work. So values and principles. Most of us know, sometimes we can't always remember them all, but there are 6 global green principles. And what I'm going to conjecture here is that those are very much about how we develop policy. So there are political principles. But when it comes to actually how we do work as an organization, they don't necessarily have a lot to tell us. Blue Ocean, what we realized is that what's missing is language around values that help us to behave in the way we need to. And we have been encouraged by some First Nation elders in our community to consider the value of practicing the 7 ancestral teachings of truth, respect, humility, wisdom, love, honesty, and bravery. And what I found really empowering when I just learned more about what those are for, they're really about, they're necessary constraints for people to live sustainably in community together. And so that just seems like a really important bedrock if we're going to work together to do this work. And then collaboration principles. This is drawing from a practice called Sociocracy 3.0. And so as to pair with, we have our principles, of our political principles. Now what are the principles that we can rely on to actually collaborate effectively? And that's what those are about. So what is blue ocean? I touched on this a little bit before, but let's compare it to what red oceans are. Red oceans, I mean, the metaphor is actually, they're red with blood because it's a fight. There's sharks in the water, and there's limited resources, there's scarcity, and it's conflictual. So the area of the known political game, right? The best practice in politics, what it means to do politics. And the idea of blue ocean is that, I like these questions. How can we harness what makes us different from other parties? How do we make the Green Party Canada necessary? And, how do we win the race 2 years early? This is where we start thinking strategically about using what makes us different to our advantage. Critically, part of this innovation thinking is about culture. And a big shift here is about safety, psychological safety. What do we do to make people know that when they show up, that they're encouraged to do what they do best, take risks, try new things, knowing that there'll be a net if they fall, and we get into this iterative practice of trying things, learning what works, cultivating those. When we fail, we know we learn from them and we move on. So that kind of innovation thinking creates a fertile habitat for us to thrive. So that's now I've just showed you that first part, which is about the thinking, the values, the principles that can help to support the kind of collaborative culture that we want. Now, what is collaborative culture about? Maybe I'll just point out there. So it's really about improving how we do decision making, what organizational structure looks like, and focusing on belonging and inclusivity. So where this really clicked for me was when I realized how much I have experienced these kinds of things when I've come together in groups or in my EDA when I was on the board, that, what do we do when there are difficult or frustrating meetings? I've been in gatherings where there's a lack of clear purpose, where few decisive outcomes are made, where we have intolerably long meetings. But big one is, when strongest opinions dominate, or when people go with the flow because we don't really like conflict, we don't know how to disagree effectively together and navigate that, and that minority voices don't get heard. It's in that go with the flow mode. And it feels like, alignment, but it can actually be quite superficial and a lost opportunity to go deeper. So these collaborative cultural practices can help us to overcome those and go deeper and draw out the wisdom, the diverse wisdom in all the people who show up. A big part of people coming together to do work together is that there's often sense making that is necessary, collective sense making. And one of my experiences is that without the processes in place to do this effectively, we're all over the place. The metaphor of like everyone's feeling different things. Oh, it's a tree. Oh, it's, help me out here.
It's a rope.
It's a rope, right.
It's a suitcase. And
we're all feeling the elephant, but we only have a little bit. But, for example, there's a step-by-step process to collectively go through sense making to decision making. And if we don't have the skills and structure to do that step by step together, we can be all over the place, and that can just lead to ineffectiveness. So collaborative cultural practices can help us that way. And the last thing I want to point out that I think is really important is in collaborative culture, and this is drawing from the Sociocracy 3.0 practice, but it's not unique to that, is to seek consent as opposed to consensus. And this can be provocative in the green community because, I think that when we think about consensus, it really conjures up our strong affinity for this egalitarian ethos, right? Oh, we all agree, that's really important. But what consensus in practice can actually do is, how do we do consensus well when we don't agree? And it often, and I invite you to consider this, will lead to watered down decisions, or at its worst, a weaponization of consensus. And it is basically veto power masked as consensus. Whereas with consent, one way to think about consent is, are there objections we need to resolve? And right away, you're acknowledging that conflict is there, but it comes with it a spirit of wanting to overcome, find out what are the conflicts, and then using these collaborative cultural practices to actually seek out, understand, and resolve objections, and actually evolve higher order synthesis of decisions that incorporates as much wisdom as possible. And once we get into the practice of it, it actually becomes more rapid and enables more action and less waiting until we all agree before we do anything. So to recap, I talked about the thinking, that mindset, the vision, the values and the principles that sort of create the conditions for us to do blue ocean type work. Then I just showed you what collaborative practices could look like and what shifts might make that would make our collaboration more effective as teams. And now we're going to the online part where we start to think what technological tools could we use to help do that at scale. And what I'm going to be introducing now is a platform, very high level, but a platform called Decidim, which is the software that the Greens Connect website is built on. And what I want to highlight is that Decidim is developed in the Basque region of Spain, and they're really exciting. They're sort of, in a lot of ways, at the cutting edge of some democratic practices there, and using technology to help empower citizens to be participatory in how they're actually making collective decisions that affect their shared responsibilities. And so what I want to highlight about this tool is that it's built from the ground up with the values and ethos of participatory democracy in mind. And maybe I'll just say that and leave that there for now. But if John Wilson is squirming at this point, know that you will be able to talk more about it. But if you think that I've missed anything critical at this point, you just let me know it. Let us know in the chat. Two things that I'll say about it that I think might matter most right now is that it is a platform that allows organizations to become visible to themselves. So they'll, for example, organize bodies that get together to make decisions, whether it's an EDA, or whether it's council, or whether it's a committee, or maybe a group of people who come together because they care about a particular issue and they want to create policy about it. This platform creates an online space for those people to come together, host their meetings, document their work, post their meeting minutes or post their meeting agendas, so that other people throughout the organization can find out what others are doing and watch, get involved, maybe join meetings. It's not a social networking platform. It's not like, it doesn't replace Slack. It doesn't replace replace Facebook. But it's really about the organizational structure, the dynamic organizational structure, to actually become, as I said before, visible to itself. So we can find out what are our peers doing in various places around the country, and maybe is there something we want to get involved with, or show them what we're doing. So the other part of it, maybe I won't go there yet, is that it also is a powerful participatory democracy platform. So it is a place where policy can be developed, and it has, remember I mentioned those step-by-step processes that we do in collaborative culture? So in like a collective decision-making at scale, there would be those phased approaches too, whether it's you have a town hall where you send out a survey and find out what do people care about, and then you take that information back, and then you ask people to rank it, right through to voting on a final decision, and then follow up to make sure it's actually getting acted upon. This tool helps to make that possible. This point I want to stress, and the way that I'll put it is that my experience in this, since I stopped serving on the Center for Violence EDA, was I had a strong interest to explore where is there room in this organization to create new value that's not in any of the structures we currently have. So it's not in EDA, or it's not on council, or it's not on a council committee. And how are those accessible? So what the Blue Ocean collaborators are stressing here is that right now it's actually really not that easy for people who want to get involved in a green movement to come into the Green Party and find their place, find their way that they can unfold their wings and do what they want to do best and create new value that isn't already being done, that is a benefit to the organization and grows this movement. So there's a lot of detail here that I won't go into, but again, going back to this idea about an organization, an activist organization that actually is visible to itself, they can come in and they can connect with people who have like-minded interests and say, oh, you could join one of our, join this policy group, or go to one of these EDA meetings because you can see when it's posted, or go to a council meeting, see what council's like, or start your own. So that's why we're really, really keen on this platform. And there'll be a demonstration of it a little bit later. I'm loving that there's some positive responses in the chat, so I'm just noticing that. This gives a little bit of a demonstration of what's possible, but I'm actually not gonna, I'm gonna skip over this because you're gonna see a demo and it's gonna make a lot more sense than this. And anyway, so this slideshow that I showed you, it is available. You may have seen it. It's on the Greens Connect website on the Blue Ocean Assembly. And if you just go to greensconnect.ca and you click on this button, this here, you'll go straight there. And that concludes the high-level primer.
So can I just read a couple of comments in the chat? Michael, just to share for those who aren't reading the chat. A couple of people, Jerry and Sue especially, noted that they really liked the consensus, the consent versus consent, versus consensus option. And they saw that we can, this can really help us to think differently about agreements and moving ahead, even if we don't have consensus. And the second thing that people seem to be excited about is Decidim, in terms of, putting something in the chat. So anyway, that's it. I just want to read that out so people know. And someone, Trudy is feeling a tremor of hope. Finally, she says, which is exactly how we felt when we found these tools.
Yeah.
Great.
That, just hearing that part just makes me really happy, because this is what I I was saying to Nero when we were doing our test run yesterday that what I was looking forward most about today is that this is good news. This is something positive to focus on that we can work on. And, goodness knows, I think we could all use some of that in this organization right now. Just, focus on where we want to go and focus on the kind of culture that we would need to actually get there. Because I know I've spoken to a number of you before about this, but this is, we're facing a cultural problem in this organization, and it has never been emphasized to the degree that it needed to be. And now we've got, 35,000 people who don't know what green culture is. We've got principles on the website, and those all sound great, but we've never, and as an organization, I'll say I'm not saying that it was necessarily my fault that we didn't do it, but we're here, we're the ones who showed up, we're collectively responsible for this, and we have an opportunity to help create this so that when we bring people in, they can learn, what does that mean? And then what do they add to it so that we can do this consistently? Because it's a big lift, this one big thing that we're trying to do together, and that requires coherence. And that doesn't happen by accident. So questions? You can raise your hand. There's a hand if you'd actually like to ask about this, or maybe go back and drill in a little bit deeper onto any of the things that have come up so far. Don't be shy. Comments even, there's a raised hand. Okay, cool. So Tom, and then Anne, and then Jan. So Tom's first. Tom, I'm calling you up on stage.
Oh, is this how? Okay, got it.
Hi.
So my understanding is this was presented to the federal council?
No.
Is that correct? It was not. Okay.
This has not been. No.
Okay. So in thinking ahead, I'm just wondering, has there been discussion on how we take over the party with this? That's a little provocative, but really moving it beyond just the people in the know to, like you said, the 35,000 members. Has that been discussed?
I have so many places I could go with that.
Is the sun hot?
So, Tom, first of all, what I should clarify is, so after this, we're going to go to the video screening of a different presentation, which is actually, it was a special council, not an official council meeting, but it was an extracurricular activity that I helped organize. And that's what council has seen. So by the end of this, I think there'll be some really good context for some juicy conversations about where to go. And I'll be very clear. I called this meeting now because we are in the campaign period of a federal council election. And these are ideas that need to spread. And the people who make these decisions ultimately are the people who get elected to council. So I'm hoping that this is sort of the beginning of spreading a conversation, and I will do this again as many times as I need to. I'll do this again.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have more questions, but I'll give other people a turn. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to remove you from the stage and call up Anne Rainey.
I'm just going to mention a technical thing for a second. So Paul Wilson said he couldn't hear Tom. So if you guys put those things in the chat, maybe Michael just repeat the question so that everyone can hear what the question is.
Okay, good idea.
Thanks.
I had the similar point. I would have worded it slightly differently than Tom. And you, therefore, I think I will hold back until I hear your other presentation, and we'll have a chance to see if it answers the questions. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anne. Back to raised hands. I'm going to remove you from the stage, and Jan Slakoff, you're next.
Can you hear me? Can I as Jan's coming on, see that Jerry has put in that this approach feels like medicine to me. That's really profound, because we have talked a lot about healing in various circles in the party, including the listening circle that we do one Sunday a month. So it's good that it feels like medicine, because we need this. We need medicine. Thank you.
And I can see the chat too. I'll just add, he added, I'm weeping. And yeah, we need this. Anyhow, my question oddly fits in with the two previous, and I think it's really just inviting you to carry on, because I was going to ask you about how this approach might have been used with other parties. So I think that fits in with what's coming next, the video thing.
It does. One thing that I will say is that it's been interesting to me. Back when this opportunity came up, and I'll get there and I'll go into more detail about how this opportunity came up for the next video. But some of the reactions immediately are, oh, but are they a Green Party? And they're not. They happen to be collaborators of a Green Party. And what I think is really interesting is that, when you're really going back to when I started this presentation, I said, this is about overcoming conflict. And, politics is conflict at scale, right? It's non-kinetic. We're not, throwing things at each other. The first past the post system, I'll just say it. It is a violent political system, pitting parties against each other. The ones who are most ideologically aligned are the mortal enemies, because they're fighting for the same, they're fighting, right? They're fighting for the same land. And even just the fact that in places where you have proportional representation, there is an incentive for ideologically aligned organizations to come together, to collaborate, to find their common ground. So we're swimming in a red ocean in so many ways, this political red ocean. And so what can we do? We can look for areas of sanity. We can create areas of sanity, ring fence an area, well, with lots of open doors, and say, in this space, for this time, for this purpose, we're going to do things differently. And you can come join us anytime you want. But in this space, we do blue ocean. We seek to collaborate. We seek to understand. Our work is driven by our principles and values, and we've learned the skills and practices to do that effectively as much as we can. All right, that's the end of my little rant. Thanks, Jan. Jan, I'm going to poke you off the stage and bring Lawrence up next.
Do you want some questions in the chat as we go along, or do you want to wait?
How about a question from the chat? Well, actually,
Sure.
Lawrence is here, so Lawrence, hi.
Hi, it's Lawrence. I'm joining you from Toronto. I live in the University Rosedale district. I guess my comment, I'm sorry, it's a little superficial. So maybe this isn't the best time. I absolutely love the contents. I've seen this presentation before. I have some concerns about the container. I scanned the book last night called Blue Ocean Strategy. It's a very interesting book. The contents here has a lot that isn't really about blue ocean strategy. So that's one concern. The other concern I have is that I looked into it, and this is a pretty heavily protected copyright space, the phrase blue ocean strategy. So I just wanted to bring that to our attention earlier rather than later. So the authors here have specifically said that, you can't use this term even in workshops. So I just wanted to get that out there early. It's not important to what we're doing today.
Right.
But at some point, a rebranding is going to be in order, I think.
I appreciate you bringing that up. And I recall that it was something that came up in conversation much earlier on. I'll be curious to hear John Wilson's perspective on this, because obviously, if it's not going to work if we're using something that we can't. I do appreciate you pointing out that we're talking about the container, and ultimately, whatever we have to call this. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. What the content of it is what we're here for. So
yeah. I guess I just then to before I go, I just say that if the goal is to attract a lot of new members quickly, then I think the brand Blue Ocean could potentially be a barrier, could potentially be an obstacle, because people might feel that they need to understand, what does that mean? And then they might go read this book, and they might get kind of confused or find it difficult to use the verb onboarding, which I don't like that much. This might actually be like a danger.
Right.
So that's all I got.
So I really appreciate that. And of course, in the spirit of seeking out and resolving objections, which is consent seeking, this is what it's all about. So thank you. Are there so Neera, you said there are questions from the chat?
So you sure this is okay?
I'm going to remove you from the stage now, Lawrence. Thank you.
So Kate's asking, I still don't get how this will help us now. Who in power will connect with this? It's like we're singing to the choir, help me. What's our thinking, as we have thought through this quite a lot?
What comes up for you?
Well, I want to point out that I noticed Adrian Curry, the Ontario Federal Council rep here. We did advertise this a little bit later in the week. And we are hoping to have more of these. And our feeling is that we will invite all Greens and Greens who are sitting now, like Adrian, in an official leadership position, who hear this. And they have had some of this presented, as you did mention earlier, Michael. Many of them are seeing themselves that this is offering an approach to some of the problems that have looked intractable up till now. So that's a start in terms of answering Kate's question. It's for sure true, just like with our EDI listening circle, that it can feel like we're singing to the choir, but we are aware of that and moving out in terms of some direct invitations to some of these and other ways of sharing this information with people who are in positions of influence, who may not show up here, but we're sharing it anyway. And we're happy to take suggestions about how to continue doing that work. Scaling out, scaling up, deepening, all of those things. Thanks. And when one person, Brent is sort of clarifying Tom McLean's question. He says, I think of this as a way to augment the GPC structure, a way of Greens getting together to talk and work together. It's an added bonus, not a takeover. We really do want to be careful how we share this and how we see it fitting in and helping Greens and the GPC. We're not trying to take over. We're not trying to, do a hostile takeover or anything like that. And you have to say that because it did originate some of this work from Spain, from the Basque region, and sometimes people jump to the conclusion that we're going to go for an independence movement or something. We're not. We have just found some tools that look like they really can help here, and as we've used them so far, they are starting to help. We are seeing changes in the circles where we're sharing these things and using them.
So we've got 15 more minutes on the clock for this section. I see Tom Neiman has raised his hand, and then Adrian Curry. And Bruce Weaver has brought something up in the chat that I really want to make sure we have a moment to address. So I'm going to request that I'm going to bring Tom onto the stage and request leanness from everyone at this point so that we can have time to address at least 3 more questions. Tom Neiman, you're on.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I see you've already answered, or Neera has answered my chat question in chat. But what I wanted to bring up was, since this Decidim comes from the Basque region, and that's a region that's been in, shall we say, political turmoil for hundreds of years, somewhat straddling France and Spain and trying to carve out its own little niche. Do we have evidence from their experience with Decidim that it has actually helped them significantly? And related to that, can we use actual examples of where Decidim has helped other groups to show the Greens that this has actually worked here and there and elsewhere, and this is why we have reason to believe that it can help us as well.
That's a really great question, Tom. And I'm actually hoping that John Wilson, when he gives his actual demo, can touch on that. I know that it is not, it's being used in many places around the world. A lot of municipalities are using it. But in terms of success stories, I'm going to defer to John, or maybe that's something we're going to have to bring up next time to make more visible to people to see its efficacy.
Okay, thanks.
So Adrian had your hand up, but it's gone. So I'm actually wondering, okay, a hand's gone back up. Adrian, okay. Adrian, I'm inviting you to the stage. Seems like you're on.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would turn my camera on, but I don't know how to do it. Oh, there it is. Oh, I got control all of a sudden. So the answer to Kate's question, how will this help us now? Well, I wish we could implement this immediately because our party needs it so badly right now. I can say, though, at the Federal Council, I could definitely put a motion in to invite Michael and Neera to present Blue Ocean to the Federal Council to consider this type of decision-making moving forward. I mean, right now we have a mixture of Robert rules and the Carver model where we use hand in hand, which is part of the problem in a sense, and this would definitely influence our decision making moving forward. So there's hope for this. As Michael said, it's going to take time to change the way we interact with each other and the way we make decisions. But this is a process, and what I see the benefit of this is changing really how we do politics differently. We keep talking about that in our written materials and whatnot, but how do we do it differently? And this is one of the ways here. So if we can introduce this to Federal Council and then have it work its way up as well as down the chain, then we can get to a place where, as a party, we really are doing participatory democracy differently. And I look at this as the evolution of our society in a sense, is that we really have to hear more voices and be more inclusive with our decision making instead of having it winner take all. So it's not going to solve our problems right now, as in a week or two, but in a month or two, we could be presented to Federal Council. And then maybe in 6 months, a year, we can change our governance structure to be more inclusive along with the lines of Blue Ocean. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, this is not a quick fix kind of thing. This is, we're changing a culture. We're creating one. But you start somewhere, right? And I have to say that it's been really, I've been involved in the organization for the past 7 years now. And after about 3 years, I started to kind of find myself in being this person who would try new things that weren't being done and throw them at a wall and see what sticks. And doing that as I'm learning what the organization is. And I've had a lot of things that didn't work. And I've been involved with things that have pissed a lot of people off. And there's something about this that clicks. And people I think are really feeling, yes, there's so many symptoms that we're experiencing, right? And it's so easy to just zero in on those. Oh, that's the problem. That has to be fixed. But it's deep. And yeah, well, it's necessary. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can I just note 3 things in the chat around the question of Decidim? John Wilson's posted a link to Decidim's, I believe it's current major users of Decidim. And Jan Slakov has corrected us, which is good that she did, because I realized I was making a mistake. Decidim originates in the Catalan region of Spain. Some people in Catalan were recently released from jail, some of the leaders. So it's a good sign that people working for self-determination there are, we may go to jail first before, might be part of the journey. And Decidim means we decide, for anybody who wants to know. And when John does his presentation, probably you can ask more specific questions as well about Decidim.
Okay. I took a chance inviting Bruce to the stage. Now, Bruce, you could have declined, so I guess that's a consent.
Right.
I'm really glad you joined us, and I'm also really glad that you raised your concern on the chat. And it's a concern that is not, like, my collaborators and I have been acutely aware of it. And as you know, because you've actually given a presentation to some people on our team about the 7 grandfather teachings. I don't know the answer. I don't want to culturally appropriate. And there's value. There's tremendous value in the 7 teachings. So what comes up for you?
Well, I agree. There's great value. And I guess for myself, I'm okay. I think we're on the right side of that very fine line between appreciation and appropriation. But yeah. I know there are other elders here in Guelph and in other communities who have said, we're not so sure. And I think part of it is going to be the symbols that we use. So if in my own practice, I use small stones to represent those 7 teachings.
Right.
I've seen other practices where 7 candles are lit to represent those teachings. Yeah. We've got to steer clear of anything that is culturally inappropriate for greens. And I don't know what the right symbol is, and maybe there isn't a symbol, but somehow we're going to have to wrestle with that piece.
Right. If it takes wrestling, I'm game. But yeah, it's worth exploring to see if there is a solution that is mutually acceptable and agreeable.
I think you're going to have to reach out to a variety of First Nations communities to sort of test the waters. Because I mean, I'm in an urban setting in Guelph. I identify as Mohawk. You might get a very different reaction from Anishinaabe or Mi'kmaq or Cree,
right,
or the West Coast. So I think you need to sample the waters.
That's really helpful advice. Thank you.
Are you checking the chat, Michael?
Oh, I haven't. No. What's
I can just mention that George Orr is approaching this with curiosity. I chatted back curiosity. Shell Goldstein has a concern about including non-GPC members to participate with us in Decidim. Do you not foresee that being problematic? Question.
Yeah. An ideal scenario would be that there is a direct correlation, that this is something that, there is a way to be sure that it's only Green Party members who are on it. Whether that means just Green Party of Canada, that would need to be explored. But at this point in time, it's difficult. It's difficult for something that didn't originate in Central, particularly something like this kind of technological tool, to integrate for various reasons that I'm sure some of you may know or could imagine, but even just bandwidth, even just strategy. So we don't have the solution yet, but yes, it's definitely a concern, and it's not where we are right now is not where we'd like to end up. That's for sure.
And I just want to point out that there is a bit of an ongoing chat discussion taking up from Bruce's comments on appreciation versus appropriation and so on. So these are conversations we need to have for sure. We're not coming with complete solutions to all of these, but we're certainly open to having all these conversations and taking guidance from from people with more knowledge and wisdom in certain areas than we have, and moving forward together respectfully.
That I'm just looking at the clock and I realize we're about at time. We probably have room for one more question. Yeah, we've got 2 minutes. If I'm going to be really sticking to the clock, and then we'll go back. We'll have our 5-minute break, so we'll leave this session, go back out into the social lounge. Questions? Sheila's asked one. Are the teachings covered in our 6 green values? You asked the word covered, and actually, I want to share something that actually Anne Lavender discovered in the early work of Blue Ocean, when we were sort of figuring out what would be our principles, what would be our values, what are these foundational agreements that we say we want to guide how we work. And the 7 teachings had been introduced into this milieu, and what Anne recognized is that the 7 teachings had a very similar, close correlation to the 7 principles of sociocracy, which the 7 principles of sociocracy are all about: creating coherence when groups come together to do good work, recognizing our full humanity and what it takes to do that sustainably. What I take from that is that an understanding that I have at this point in time, which is the purpose behind what actually setting some agreements and some guiding, enabling constraints around what we will do and what we will not do, and what we will do our best to do when we come together. I'm not sure whether those all show up in the 6 principles, but that's just, I wanted to share that for what it's worth. Shall we leave it there, knowing that it's an ongoing conversation in an ongoing infinite process of collective sense making? But let's take a break. Anira, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say on that topic, I think all of us, whether it's the sociocracy principles and the 7 grandfather teachings and our 6 core green principles, we're all coming with different ways of understanding core values. And we could have quite rich discussions about how those overlap, how they map onto each other, and how we can come to something that would be the expression of it for all of us as Greens, or agree that through that exploration that we are actually all espousing these same, or grounding ourselves in these same core values, even though we are using different words or different symbols to represent them. That's a profound way to understand unity in diversity. We don't actually all have to use the same language or the same symbols or the same concepts. If we have conversations among ourselves where we understand that we are really actually all talking about the same heart piece, the same body groundedness, the same soul center, we can speak to each other and respect each other's different languages and different words and different symbols. That would probably be a better way than trying to get 35,000, let alone 35 million people all agreeing on the same words to mean the same thing. Because the diversity is quite beautiful, as long as we can recognize and respect that we are actually all, we're all these wells are going down to the same water source in the end. Right? So it would be really wonderful to have those conversations with each other. Really wonderful.
Thanks, Nira. That's a great way to end. So thanks, everyone. See you in the social lounge, and take the break, whatever you need to get ready. And we'll go 5 minutes from now, so we'll be a few minutes late, but that's okay. And I'll pull you back into this session for the video.
Great.
Bye.
Enjoy the break.